And this workshop, Dormant Season Pruning, will be taught by my colleague, Ryan Watson. And Ryan's going to take you through this workshop, and I will be keeping an eye on the chat. So if you do have any questions as we're going through, there's no stupid questions. We're all learning together. So make sure that you are engaging here in the chat, and I will be paying attention to that. This workshop is being recorded, and we do send out the slides and recording and resources after this workshop. So if you are a note taker, that's great. But if you are not, we will take care of that for you. So we'll be sending out some notes to everybody who attended this workshop. And now I'll pass it to Ryan to lead us through.
Thank you so much, Ashley. My name is Ryan Watson. I'm the National Orchard Operations and Education Manager here with the Giving Grove. We're a national nonprofit that works with nonprofit network in 16 cities across the country. It's so exciting to have people joining us from so many different states. I see some familiar faces and some new ones. And I'm really excited to be presenting this workshop for you. We'll be doing workshops every month throughout the season, so trying to really hit those seasonally appropriate topics. And for this one here in February, where I'm reporting to you from the Western Catskill Mountains, dormant season pruning is well underway. So I wanted to just kind of give you all a sense of kind of what these overall procedures that we're going to be doing in the process, and see what kind of questions that you have. So just before we get started, I wanted to give you a little bit of a sense of my background and where I'm coming from. I grew up in Los Angeles, California. I started in a community garden like many folks on this call. From there, I moved to New York, to Brooklyn, and got involved in urban farming, starting a farm at the Domino Sugar Factory. From there, I fell in love with vegetable production, and my wife and I moved to the Catskills and started our own farm in 2017, Wild Russet Farm, where I'm at now. We've been engaged in holistic orchard management since 2017. We're in an area of the country that has a ton of wild apples. So I just became super fascinated with apples. This is us planting our first apple tree here in the spring of 2017. Sadly, that tree is no longer with us. And so I'm hoping today to be able to come and share some of the mistakes that we've made over the years to be able to help everyone with their backyard orchard, and to use this as an opportunity to say that we can learn from our mistakes. We're not always going to do things right the first time, but this is a great opportunity to expand our knowledge. And as well, I've just recently joined the board of the North American Fruit Explorers, which is also a great resource for backyard orchardists and just fruit nerds all over the country. Here's a little bit of our cider operation from this last year. We were a vegetable farm. You can see those first trees that we planted there now grown up with the sheep grazing. So it's been quite a journey. So one of the things we kind of wanted to start off with, because we know that when talking with people that there's a lot of concerns about pruning and a lot of things that prevent us from starting to prune. And so I'm going to ask Ashley, we're going to kind of break out into small breakout rooms and kind of have a discussion about what it is that kind of stops us from pruning.
And for those of you who have never done breakout rooms before, so you're going to be automatically shuffled into a room with a couple other people. And this is a chance for you guys to talk to each other for just a couple minutes. And we want you to just talk about what prevents you from pruning, your experience with pruning, what concerns you have. So this will just be a 3-minute breakout room. you're going to be shuffled into this room, and then you'll automatically be brought back to this large room when those are done. So I will see you back here in a little bit, and you'll be talking about what prevents you from pruning and what concerns you have. All right. Okay, for those of you who are in this main room, what prevents you from pruning? Or have you pruned, or what concerns do you have?
I prune, but I think I prune too much. I always get the scalens or whatever growing.
Yeah. I prune too much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin. Anyone else?
I think I prune too little. I'm afraid I'll make a mistake, so I'm very cautious and conservative.
Yeah, exactly. Prune too much, prune too little. What else?
Different varieties. Apples. I got apples, peaches, grapes, plums. Everyone is supposed to plum different, I guess, you know.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I think pruning peaches are difficult because you want to leave that umbrella, upside down umbrella, the center open, and I always think that's terribly destructive to the tree, but I guess it isn't.
yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to know, I guess. That's why I'm here.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I think the difference between pruning between species is definitely a thing that takes some practice, because if you take the approach of pruning a peach tree to an apple and a pear, then we're going to cut off all the fruit buds. And I know that was definitely a concern of mine when I first started pruning the trees. So definitely
I
will
had
that.
I had 2 peach trees where I got more than 2, but I had 2 last year, and one of them produced 1 peach, a beautiful, nice peach. And now I'm afraid to touch the tree because I don't want to. I'm hoping it'll bear more fruit this time than, so I left it alone.
Well, hopefully we'll get a good. Where are you zooming in from?
Pennsylvania,
Pennsylvania,
North,
right? Not
yeah,
too far.
Tioga, Pennsylvania. Right about,
okay, we're gonna have everyone coming back to us.
I'm very close to upstate New York where all the vineyards and stuff are at. I'm right on like Corning, New York.
Okay, yeah, that's not too far from us.
Okay.
I'd like to know how to prune a witch hazel shrub because I'm interested in getting witch hazel fruit or nuts, whatever you want to call them.
All right,
You
everybody,
mean,
welcome back.
hazelnuts, not witch hazel.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Matt. Yeah, witch hazel. You're right. No, I'm sorry. Hazelnuts.
Yeah, hazelnuts.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
hazelnuts.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Said the wrong thing. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. Really, you shouldn't have to worry about pruning them to get nuts. Most of the problem that we particularly have is them getting pollinated. So that's a story for another workshop.
Maybe I just need to thin them a little bit. Right now, they're very much of a thicket, and I feel like that's way too much foliage and too much.
Yeah, thin out some of your canes. It's nice to maybe have 10 canes on them, and I know you probably have 30 or 40 easily.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
that's how they do.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, hello, welcome back, everybody. So thanks so much for participating in the breakout rooms. I think that we heard some folks are a little bit concerned about pruning too much. Some folks are concerned about pruning too little. Kind of learning about which ones are fruit buds and which are vegetative buds. So we're gonna go ahead and keep moving through here. So one of the things that I like to always start with is, why is it that we're trying to prune, right? When we think about the overall purpose of what we're trying to do when we're pruning our trees, and one of those things is about kind of making sure that we have a good airflow around the tree, making sure that there is good circulation. This also gives us an opportunity to remove dead, diseased, and crossing branches. So if we see any black rot on our plums, or we see fire blight, this is a good time of year to remove that wood. Always when we start at a tree, we can remove those dead and crossing branches. The reason that we want to be doing that in this season is because everything is dormant. You know, we have disease and fungal infection that can get into these open wounds, and we want to make sure that we're doing that in a time of season where they're not going to spread through the tree. And when we're thinking about the purpose of pruning, one of the things that we're thinking about is, in the early years, we're trying to develop a structure to the tree. So we want to create those horizontal branches, 3 to 5 what we call scaffold branches, that allow the weight of the tree to hold that fruit. And in those subsequent years, we want to be managing that fruit weight, and it allows us to also control the height of the tree, so that it doesn't get too far out of our ability to spray it, to harvest, and to do all the things that we need to do. I always like to tell people to think about looking at a tree and to work backwards. Think about a mature fruit tree and how it has those nice open scaffold branches, and start to work backwards from that. So some overall tips for pruning. It's like the most important thing that I tell people is to make sure that you get out and prune your trees. It's so much better to prune them than to not. Just a few minutes, 10 minutes of pruning can really save you hours and lots of challenges in the long run. If we're not out there pruning, we're not spurring that new fruiting wood, we're not giving that really nice structure to the tree, it can be prone to fungal diseases and that sort of thing. And another thing that we really want to consider when we're pruning is to not prune during wet weather. So if we've got snow or rain in the forecast, this is time when the fungal diseases and the pathogens can kind of spread themselves. And so we like to prune on those days when it's really nice and dry. It'll close up those wounds quickly. And one of the things we sort of think about is that pruning in the dormant season is going to trigger a vigorous growth response. And when we prune in the summer season, we're going to be slowing the vigor of the tree because we're taking out that energy. So this concept of pruning as energy and vigor management. So we have this diagram from Susan Poizner's new fruit tree pruning book. And this kind of gives a sense of what we're going to achieve when we prune in different seasons. So when we talk about pruning in the wintertime, the tree has taken all of that energy from the summer, it's stored that energy into the root system. And when we start to make cuts in the tree, it's going to have a response. And one of the things we'll talk about is kind of predicting what that response is going to be from what kind of cuts that we're going to make. So if we need to slow down the vigor of the tree, we're going to cut during the summertime. And if we need to kind of increase that vigor, we're going to cut during the dormant pruning season. And one of the other really important things that we're trying to achieve with pruning is to be able to maximize the sunlight that the trees are going to be exposed to. So we can do this by pruning into open spaces of sunlight, pruning to the outward facing bud that's going to make that tree move in the direction that we want it to. This is really an opportunity for us to work closely with the trees and give them what they want, right? They want to get more sunlight. They want to have a nice open shape. One of the things that I use as a rule of thumb during the season is that if you have a really nice dappled sunlight underneath the tree during the summertime, right, you get a little bit of light coming through, but it's really hitting those leaves, is when we know that we're kind of at a good framework for what the tree structure is looking like. And one of the other important things to consider is when we should be pruning. So pruning during the dormant season gives us a really good opportunity to see the structure of the tree, to be able to see that bud swell, so we can see really clearly those vegetative buds, the leaf buds. And we can also see those flowering buds and know sort of what we're pruning and how much we're going to leave behind. Now, the question of exactly when we're pruning is going to vary across the country. But really the most important thing is after we kind of get that cold, hard freeze in the fall, and but really what we want to make sure is that we have waited until that extreme cold has passed. So when we're talking about these temperatures in the single digits or below zero, when we make these pruning cuts, they can make the trees a little bit more susceptible to that cold damage. So if you're in a part of the country like I am, where we are currently getting snow and it gets real cold out there, we can kind of, if we can, sort of prune those larger trees first, and they're a little bit less susceptible to that cold, and then we can work our way into pruning those smaller trees. And also, as I said before, best to prune on a sunny and dry day. That is going to close up those wounds in the tree and make sure that they're not susceptible to fungal diseases. Now, some of the basic equipment needs that we like to recommend. So this is going to depend on the size of the branch that you're pruning. So we start with the hand pruners. Those are good for about pencil size, an inch. Sometimes you can get a little bit bigger branches if your pruners are really nice and sharp. But once we get a little bit larger than that, we like to recommend using loppers. Those are on the right there. Those will allow you to make a really nice clean cut. If we have branches that are bigger than 2 inches, then we recommend using a pruning saw. That's on the left there. It's Corona and Silky are great brands that we like to recommend. Felco for the hand pruners, and loppers as well at Corona is another nice economical option. And it's also really important to have an alcohol spray or a bleach spray to clean the tools between trees. This ensures that we're not transferring any disease, and make sure that we have really nice, healthy cuts. Another thing I like to recommend is to have a sharpening stone. Really, we want to make sure that our tools are really nice and sharp. Without them being sharp, we can leave behind some stubs, we can leave behind breaks in the tree, in the cambium, and in the bark, and we don't want to do that. It can be kind of a future infection point. And a note here to make sure to contact your local Giving Grove program manager. They may have access to tools for you to use. They may have other equipment and supplies. So definitely check out that map and see what your local Giving Grove program is going to be. Now, one thing that I like to kind of talk about, and this is how we can sort of start to predict how the tree is going to respond when we make the cuts. And this is something that is called auxin. I like to call it the hidden factor. Because how many times have we gone out and pruned our trees, and then the next season we cut a lot off in the dormant season, and the next season it just responded with a ton of growth, and then it was a total mess, and we're kind of battling this long-term challenge of having too much growth to cut off. So really what's happening here is that we have auxin that's inside the branch tips. The auxin is a growth hormone that regulates the growth of the tree, and it is something that kind of says, I'm the boss. When you have that branch growing up towards the sunlight, it's going to tell the rest of the tree to not grow any side shoots, to give all the resources to the end of that branch. And that is sort of what is going to determine this growth of the tree in response to our cuts. So I like to think of it as like a pendulum effect. The more we pull that back, the deeper of a cut we make, the more of a response we're going to get that next season. So if we're trying to make a branch grow really far that next season, the farther back we cut it, the farther we pull that pendulum, the farther it's going to grow out that next season. And one more thing here with the auxin is it's super important that we can get with horizontal branches, we get fruit, and on those vertical branches, we get leaves. Right? This is going to be super important when we think about what we're pruning as we move forward. And do we have any questions at the moment? So here's a little bit more about this auxin, right? The way that it works is that it accumulates in the end of the branch, and it stops, it inhibits that lateral shoot growth, those side shoots from growing off of the branch, right? So if we cut that branch tip off, we're losing that auxin, we're allowing the side branches to grow. So if we're trying to encourage branches to grow off the side, we can cut off the end of that branch tip. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we move forward. Now, how does this work in practice? So the two main cuts that we're going to be making when we're doing a pruning are going to be heading cuts and thinning cuts. So a heading cut is when we shorten the length of the branch, right? At any point, we want to make that branch shorter. It's growing too long. We want more branches to grow off the side. We're going to use that heading cut. If we want to remove that branch entirely, say the branches are too close to one another, we're going to use what's called a thinning cut. Here's an example of sort of all these kind of elements of the tree that we're going to be looking at. You're going to see the water sprouts here. We're going to see that crotch angle. We're going to see those strong crotch angles, the suckers growing from the bottom of the tree there, these primary scaffold branches at that nice angle, right? That's what we're trying to achieve here in the tree. So when we're making this cut, we want to make sure that we're gonna cut at the right space, right? So if we cut that angle too deep, it's not gonna be good for the tree, right? If we leave too much of a stub there, that's gonna leave a piece of dead wood that we're not gonna like have in there. What we're trying to do is we're cutting at a sloping 45-degree angle towards an outward facing bud. So when we talked about before, about directing the energy of the tree towards the open sunlight. This is a really, really crucial way in which we can do that. So if you see on the right there, my pruners are right up next to that bud. In this case, I want the tree to grow out this way, so I can direct it toward a bud that is growing in that direction. If I want to direct it in the other direction, I would use one of those lower buds that's sort of facing in a different direction. And this is really super helpful when we're thinking about the future of the tree and where we want it to grow. So this is how we can kind of guide the tree. Now, when we're talking about removing a branch entirely, it's really important to be mindful of a piece on the tree called the branch collar. And you can see that on the left here. That's that raised ring of tissue at the base of the branch. Now, we don't want to cut that off entirely. And the reason is because that is where the tree is going to close up its wound. It's going to enable that tree to really create a healthy space. So you can see on the right here, this is an example of a healthy tree closure. It's starting to close up around that area to close out any exposure for dormant like disease that can get into that area of the tree. Another important thing, and this is something that we can do during the spring, summer, and winter seasons, is to remove those suckers. So suckers are going to be growing from the base of the tree. They're growing below the graft point, the graft union of the tree. So it's going to be growth from that rootstock of the tree. And as well, we have on the right there, we have what are called water sprouts. Now, those are these vertical branches that are growing up. They're not going to set fruit. And so they're taking a lot of energy out of the tree, and those are really, really good ones to remove. So if you're kind of wondering where I should start, removing water sprouts, removing suckers, removing that dead and diseased wood is always a great place to start. And also I would say here, and I should have said this at the beginning, but you can just find a non-fruiting tree to practice this stuff on, right? Go out and find a branch, go out and find something, you know, a local tree in your neighborhood. You can practice pruning on this, on those trees to get that hang of it. See what it feels like. Are your pruners sharp enough? Are you able to get at that right angle, right? The only way to learn is to practice. So here's this question of kind of what's going to happen next. So now that we know a little bit about these different types of cuts, we know about the auxin that's in the tree. So on the right here, we have this 1-year-old stem tree. We like to call it a whip. The whip will be cut down, and as you can see, it's going to encourage that lateral side branching coming off of the main stem there. All right, so we've gone over a lot of stuff. Remember, this workshop is being recorded and we're going to send out notes afterwards as well. But we wanted to kind of take a little bit of a break here and see kind of what it is that you can remember from these beginning parts of the workshop.
So you'll see a poll pop up, and there's a couple questions there. So just answer those questions, number 1 and number 2. And while we're waiting for these responses, take the opportunity to type any questions that you may have so far into that chat. This is the time to ask your questions. We've got not only Ryan on today, but program managers from across the country. So if you do have any questions, you can put those in the chat. Oh, some people are not seeing the poll. Hold on just a second. I just put a QR code in the chat, so you can use that QR code to access the poll.
Right, well, it looks pretty good. Looks like we got most people following along here, that if we cut off the end of the branch, we're going to get more side growth along that branch. And that we want to encourage those horizontal branches, because that's where we're going to get the most fruiting wood.
So the answer to when I cut off the end of a branch, the tree will respond with more side growth along that branch. So everyone did a great job on that one. And then fruiting wood grows on which type of branch? And we had a couple people here type in different answers. So Ryan, do you want to review that one a little more?
Sorry, could you say that one more time?
Yes, that is the fruiting wood grows on which type of branch? We had a couple different responses to that one, so we might need to clarify there.
Great. I can't seem to see the other responses.
Just a couple people chose vertical, a couple people chose I'm not sure, and most people chose horizontal.
Perfect. So as we were talking about that auxin in the branch, when we encourage those branches, if you think about when a tree is growing initially, right, and we just have those like initial first years of growth, and we just have leaves, and they tend to be growing just straight up. When we start to get fruit weight on those trees, that's gonna make the weight of that branch is going to start to move out horizontally. Now, when we encourage branches to be at a horizontal shape, that is going to trigger the tree to grow that fruiting wood. The trees are triggered to grow fruit on horizontal branches. And pruning is one of the ways that we can do that, right? So if we are making sure that those branches are coming out at that nice angle, we're also going to talk about some other techniques to do that with limb spreaders as well. So one of the main structures of a tree that we like to try and encourage people to use, and this is one that lends itself really well to apples, pears, and Asian pears, and that's the central leader. So the central leader is that, like when we talk about the tip of that growing branch, right? That is the one that wants to go up to the top. It is just taking those resources, and then what we're gonna do is gonna have those horizontal scaffold branches growing out, radiating from the side of the tree. We're looking for about 3 to 5 scaffolding branches. And we want to try and maintain a distance of about 15 inches between those branches, right? So we want a 15-inch gap between those branches, and we want to start that first set of scaffolding branches at about 30 inches off the ground. The reason we don't want to get too close to the ground is there's a lot of moisture down there. It kind of tends to get shaded out. In some urban environments, having fruit too close to the ground may not be the best thing. So we want to have that nice space from the base of that start of those scaffold branches. Oh no.
The share just stopped.
Oh, shoot. Okay, are we back?
Yep, back up.
Okay. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so when we look at the scaffolds from above, what we want to do is we want to see those scaffold branches growing out in all the different directions, right? So that we're maximizing that sunlight. We're growing those scaffold branches out at a horizontal angle to be reaching at that maximum amount of sunlight that they can get, right? So we're aiming for on the left, right, that radiating branches out, as opposed to that kind of enclosed section on the right that we're seeing there. And then we want to have that space between those sets of scaffolding branches. So here's another example of kind of that really nice big spacing. We have that really tall central leader there, the separate tiers of scaffold branches, right? And those are going to give us that main structure of the tree that the fruiting wood is going to grow off. And then on those scaffolding branches, we want to have about 12 inches between those splits, right? 12 to 15 inches so that we have enough spacing. The tree is going to get enough sunlight. The leaves are going to dry when we get rain, so we don't have any disease that kind of gets a hold there. Here's another kind of example of how we can see those different scaffold branches coming off, right? With that central leader shape. Now, sometimes when we try and grow trees, they just don't want to adhere to that one central leader, right? This can happen a lot of times with apples, with European pears, with Asian pears, cherries and plums. So this is a similar kind of structure to the central leader, but we have multiple leaders kind of growing off of those scaffold branches, right? We want also a similar distance and spacing between those scaffolds. Make sure that we have about 15 inches so we have enough going through the tree, enough airflow. One of the ways that I've heard is an old-time farming saying, they sort of say, for a dwarf tree or a dwarf-sized rootstock tree, we're looking to be able to throw the family cat through the branches. For a semi-dwarf sized tree, we're looking to be able to throw the family dog through the branches. And for a full-sized standard tree, we're looking to throw the family cow through the branches. So that kind of gives you some sort of visualization of the spacing that we're looking to achieve. And lastly, we also have the open center tree or vase shape. So this is great for stone fruit. We heard someone earlier refer to it as like the upside down umbrella. We're aiming to get those really horizontal branches coming out, radiating from the tree. It allows a lot of airflow to the center of the tree. This is particularly important, like peaches really like to get direct sunlight on that fruit, right? It can ripen that fruit up. It makes it blush. It adds that sweetness to it. So makes for a really good shape for the peach trees. And one other consideration that is really super important here, and this is the branch angle. So if we have a tree that is in full season and has all that weight of that fruit, and it's got a really tight angle here, right? What's going to happen is as that fruit weight starts to accumulate in the season, it's going to break, right? This happens a lot with stone fruits. I'll tell you that we've lost a lot of trees over the year. Even when we're pruning them, even when we're thinning them, the fruit weight can be so heavy that it just really wants to take that branch down. so one of the ways that we can really encourage that really great goal, which is a 45 to 60 degree angle, right? It's going to have a really nice ability to hold that fruit weight, is to use limb spreaders. So limb spreaders can be a variety of different things. Here we have some commercial limb spreaders that we can sometimes get through your Giving Growth program, or as well online you can find these. You can also make them yourself. Clothespins work really well when the branches are really super young. You can also tie stakes into the ground to be able to encourage that really nice nice branch angle to be established. And here we see another example of what that strong branch angle is going to look like, and kind of what that weak branch angle is looking like there. And one other important thing that I wanted to share with you is this distinction between the leaf buds and the flower buds. So in our first few seasons, we're just going to have leaf buds, but as our trees start to get to mature, we're going to be able to want to manage that fruit weight a little bit. So being able to distinguish between the leaf buds here, like shoot bud it says, or the flower bud, is going to be very important, right? Because we want to make sure that we're not cutting off all of the fruiting wood and that we're creating appropriate spacing, right? That we have too much fruit on our stone fruits, we're likely to get some branch breaking, right? If we have the fruit too close together, we're just not going to have a really good quality fruit. We'll tend to get smaller fruits that just don't match up to the same size and quality if we have them appropriately spaced. And I think one other thing that I realized that I did not address, that is kind of the amount of what we're trying to take off from a tree each year. So when we look at pruning apples and pears versus pruning stone fruits like peaches, we're definitely going to want to take a lot less from the apples and pears than we are going to want to take from the peaches. So usually we use about a 10 to 20% is kind of what we're looking for those palm fruits, because those trees don't flower as much, they don't fruit as much. And if we take that same response and we use that same approach towards towards stone fruit, and we take that towards apples, we're going to cut off a lot of our fruiting, a lot of our flowering buds. Whereas with stone fruits, we really are going to take 30 to 50%. If we take that much from an apple, what's going to happen is it's going to have that really aggressive auxin response. That next season, you're going to pull that pendulum back really heavy, and it's going to set a lot of growth. And then we have kind of this long-term battle of trying to balance the vigor of the tree. So what we would do is prune more during that summer season to reduce that vigor so that we're not having that big response. Because, right, if we have that big response, we're going to end up having future challenges with too much growth in there, not enough airflow, and that can really kind of set the stage for future disease problems. All right.
Yeah, Ryan, we do have some questions in the chat. And one is about mature trees and when to top a mature fruit tree.
Yeah, so topping is, and maybe Matt might be able to speak to this a little bit. Topping is something that I find to be kind of an aggressive approach.
And what does it even mean? What does topping even mean?
Yeah, so topping is when we start to get a tree that gets just too tall, and topping is just taken the top of it off entirely. With topping, I mean, I think that, and Matt, maybe you can step in here in terms of your thoughts on topping, but I sort of think that, you know, if we're gonna top, you would recommend to kind of do something later in the season so that we're not having a crazy vigorous response.
Yeah, that's how we manage our topping on trees, and this really becomes necessary with a lot of the aggressive growers like Asian and European pears. They're very upright in their growth, they're very fast in their growth, and oftentimes a mature one has the ability to get 18 to 24 to 30 feet tall, depending on what it's grafted onto. So we end up topping these in August, July, August, sometimes early September. And really what this looks like is sometimes we're taking 2 to 6 feet out of the tree. And we're having to revisit that every year at that same time frame. So it's something that if you have taller trees, you will want to do that, but you just need to know how to do it and when to do it, because it does require pole pruners. It does require getting on a ladder sometimes. And it's sort of next level, no pun intended. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah, another question here is vertical vertical water sprouts. We're pruning those out. They can be used for scion wood. Kind of that question. There's some fear in here that pruning a tree is going to kill it if you prune too much. Is there any response on that?
So I think, as I said, depending on the species, we're going to kind of take a different approach, right? So we don't want to take too much of a tree in a given season. With an apple tree, I say no more than like 25–30% max, because you're going to get that really super vigorous response in the growth. And also when this also is a thing in cold climates as well. So if you're taking a lot of growth out of the tree, it can make it a little more susceptible to cold winter damage. You know, I would say like to prune, but also at the same time, if we're not pruning those trees, they're going to not be in as best of a place as they can be. I think I've had this happen a lot of times where folks have come and said, well, my tree doesn't fruit anymore. I don't know what to do. And you know, the first question is, well, when was the last time that you pruned it? And without pruning those trees, they're not going to be setting that new wood, right? They need some human intervention in that regard. Most of these trees, the vast majority of fruit trees are going to be grafted, right? So if we're thinking they already have human intervention in their genetic makeup, right? So we have to kind of work with those trees based upon kind of that understanding that we are there to help each other in them producing lots of fruit and us helping with the structure and health of the tree.
Another question. So is there a temperature to pay attention to so we know when bud emergence is on stone fruit, or do you just watch the tree?
Yeah, just watch the tree. It is, you know, we can try and give some overarching temperature cues, but really the most important thing is to just watch those trees as they start to begin to swell. And then also to note that on stone fruit, on peaches, those are the ones we're gonna do last. We're gonna prune those right before they start to break their buds. And that's gonna enable us to really see that fruit and to really imagine how much fruit is going to be on that tree, right? How much weight that branch is going to be able to put in there. Matt, you have something?
Yeah, I'd just also add apricots and plums to that as well, because with temperature fluctuations, both apricots and plums will sometimes break bud early. And if you start pruning those early, they're going to want to break bud even earlier. So yeah, hold your horses on those as well.
So, two good questions. So this first question, I have a young apple tree and I was wondering how old it should be before I prune it. And we've had some extreme temperature fluctuations from 70 degrees to a -11, and just kind of worried about how to handle that.
Great question. So I'll start with the last one in terms of that cold temperatures, right? So, and it's going to depend on the type of rootstock of your tree and how big the size of the tree is. But generally, a smaller tree is gonna be more susceptible to that cold than a larger tree. When we make those cuts of pruning and we get those really deep, extreme fluctuations of temperatures, it's gonna be more vulnerable to the cold. That being said, there are certain rootstocks that are a little bit more cold susceptible than others. So I think I would ask also if your tree is a dwarf or a semi-dwarf or a standard tree. Those are important things to consider. The dwarf trees are going to be a little more susceptible to that cold. And really, like, getting in terms of when we're starting our pruning, we want to start that pruning as soon as it is something that we need to maintain that structure. So usually when we get a tree from the nursery, it's going to be a few years old, and kind of, if it's ready to start sending those lateral branches, right? If we have that one whip tree and it's tall enough for us to be able to start setting those lateral branches, right? We can make a cut that's going to encourage that lateral branching to start.
Yeah, this is a good question, and I think with the when is a tree too young, it's not really ever, once you have it in the ground and it's been there for a little bit, it's not going to be too young to prune, as long as you're paying attention to how much you're taking out. This is a great question. Like, when is the dormant period over anyway? Like, when is it too late to prune?
So when those leaves start to break, when those buds start to open up, that's that's kind of when the dormant season ends. And it's gonna vary by parts of the country. Here for us in the Northeast, we start to break bud in April or May. So if you're in a climate that is kind of similar to that Northeastern climate, that's about when we're looking at that. But for some of our affiliates down south, that's going to be in February or maybe March. So kind of depending on where you are in the country. And it's also going to vary depending on the cultivar that you have as well too, right? So that there are some varieties that are earlier in the season that are going to break their dormancy. There are some varieties that will break dormancy later in the season. If late frosts are a concern in your part of the country, as they are in ours, in 2013, we had a 25-degree night in the end of May during our blossom season that killed the entirety of the fruit crop around, or the apple crop around us. Mulching trees is a really fantastic way to keep them sleeping during the season, and to not wake up too early. Because if they wake up too early and then we get that random cold night, it can really do a lot of damage to your fruit.
And just noting the time, is there anything else you want to share?
Yes. So if you have any questions on these, we're always available. Definitely check out these resources. There's a dormant season pruning guide With the Giving Grove here, we have additional educational resources. Definitely reach out to your local Giving Grove affiliate. They have all kinds of resources available for you. Michael Phillips' Holistic Orchard and Lee Rice, the Pruning Brook, are great reference materials. And I'll also give a shout out to NAFEX. Lots of great information on their website, archived from their past workshops. And Susan Poisner's new pruning book is available for e-download and is coming out, I think, this week. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. This is the first of the workshops I'll be leading this season. The next upcoming workshop we'll be covering holistic sprays. We're going to be working with Nick Wren from Living Soil Tree Farm to cover starting your own trees from seed, scouting pests and diseases. We're going to be doing a soil fertility and climate resilience workshop in the summertime. So we are really grateful for you to give us your time today, and hope that you have learned some things and can go out into your orchard and get some pruning done.
Yeah, and if you need to leave at 2 o'clock, we want to be timely, but let's stay on for another 10 minutes or so. If anybody has any questions, we'd love to just stay on and answer. But if you don't have any more questions, you can keep an eye out for our resource page, and we're going to have all of these links, all of these questions. Any information that was shared here, we'll make sure to share that out with you. So keep an eye on your email for those follow-up resources. They'll be really comprehensive. And if you would like to stay on and ask some more questions, we are going to stay on for about 10 more minutes. But if you need to leave, you can go ahead and hop off, and make sure to take that survey that is in the chat before you head out. Someone is asking about if trees should be sprayed immediately after pruning.
Trees should be sprayed immediately after pruning. Well, so the first, there's no need to, if we're talking about pruning in the dormant season, you don't need to spray a tree after pruning, like as practice. Because we're working in the time of season when, the fungal diseases and pathogens are going to be dormant. However, what we do recommend is that you do get those first, you want to make sure that you do have a dormant spray on before the dormant season ends. And that's the first of our holistic sprays. Is a perfect question for the next, leading into the next workshop. Because what you want to make sure that you do is in that dormant season that we're able to completely cover that tree with all the beneficial microbes, the neem oil, the kelp, and that is going to give the tree a really nice start into the season, so that we're kind of able to tackle those pathogens before they take emergence in the spring, and then that will trigger kind of the beginning of those holistic sprays. Matt, you.
Yeah, there's a couple questions here. Tips on pruning figs, tips on pruning pawpaw.
Pawpaw really doesn't need too much pruning. I think it would also kind of ask the question, pawpaw not so much pruning needed. Just managing suckers really is kind of the thing. You can follow a lot of these similar principles that we have with the pawpaws. With figs, the pruning will depend upon where you are in the country. So if you're fortunate enough to have a fig that doesn't die back to the ground every year, then you're going to take on a different route. But if you're talking about figs kind of in the Northeast, we're not really too much pruning necessary. We kind of let them grow up and have a bunch of leaders. Matt, do you have more thoughts about fig pruning?
Well, I want to go back to the pawpaw one really quick, because I do know when Yeah, when pawpaws, when you get them in the ground, they do want to send up a lot of branching that's really close together, and that is a problem, and also a lot of branching that is very narrow angled. Um, and so, as Ryan said, I mean, practicing a lot of those same principles by having good branch angles, having good space between the branches. What I've found with a lot of pawpaws is those branches will want to come up almost directly above the next branch, and so that becomes a challenge where you're having to thin out a lot of those branches, so you have well radiated limbs going around the tree, and limbs that are going to be, you know, maybe a foot or so above one another. So don't let them get too crowded, and do make sure you have good connection on those limbs. Pawpaw fruits get heavy, and those branches break really easily. It's not strong wood, so that is totally a challenge. Yeah, the thing on figs, I guess I would like to know where. So this question came in: where are you from? And this is Jim.
Because definitely we're gonna take
Atlanta.
Yeah. So I would, I would talk to your to Fred and Flannery down there in Atlanta. They, you know, up here in our zone 5, I don't know, we're back to a zone 5. You know, I don't care what they put us at a couple years ago. We grow figs as multi-trunk shrubs. You guys can grow them as trees down there. So I think better to talk with them.
Another pawpaw question. I thought this has several things that we could respond, but is a baby pawpaw that comes up 5+ feet from the larger tree considered a sucker? So this can go into growing patterns or a conversation about cultivars.
It probably is it is a clonal sucker from the same tree. So that's how pawpaws grow. They form these colonies, and so this is a root shoot from the mother plant. So it would be the same genetics as. Now, I don't know if the pawpaw you have is a grafted variety or if it's a true seedling variety pawpaw. Regardless, it is coming from the roots of that pawpaw. So it is genetically the same as the roots. Maybe it's the same as the scion. So, yes. And would it be considered a sucker? It could be, yes, certainly. If you have a cultivated variety, yes, it would be considered a sucker. If it's on its own roots, it would be considered a part of the plant.
I like this question. Is there any circumstance you would not prune a vertical branch or sprout?
So sometimes I will take a vertical branch or sprout. I mean, if there's just too much going on in that season, and you can take that vertical branch and make it a horizontal branch by using weights, by tying down, and that sometimes is helpful. There's some more advanced like pruning techniques or techniques called pretzeling that happens with apple trees, but that's probably a little bit too much. It's really about kind of controlling that auxin response and the vigor of the tree. Matt, what you think?
Yeah. So the question again was, are there cases when you would not prune? Could
That's
you
correct.
restate the question? I'm trying to find it in the chat here. I lost
Yeah,
it.
is there any circumstance that you would not prune off a vertical branch or a sprout?
Yeah, I think sometimes you might be heading them back. You might be heading them back to help promote another branch. In some cases, there might be a vertical sprout coming off the main trunk, and that might be getting trained into a new central leader. So if you see a reaction like that, let's say your apple tree, we'll assume this is an apple, could be a pear. But let's say the central leader has taken sort of a right turn and is now off to the side, yet you have a vertical shoot coming up on the left side of that looks like it might want to be a new central leader. Yes, you can train that to become a new central leader and lop off something the other side of your tree. So yes, the answer is yes, and this is definitely when you're trying to retrain the growth in your tree.
And I'd also just add real quick that if something happens like Matt's saying, where you're needing a new leader or a new scaffold branch, like say you get a really bad storm and it breaks off one of your main scaffold branch, and then you have this kind of empty space that used to be filled by that branch, that's kind of a good instance in which you can utilize one of those other branches, pruning to an outward facing bud to take in that empty space that is left by the branch breaking.
One about pomegranates, and should we be emphasizing should we just be emphasizing airflow and opening the center when it comes to pomegranates?
I'm gonna defer to Matt.
This is another one that's outside of although you might have some pomegranate LA experience, so I'll let you handle that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, the similar principles of the central, working with the central leader, modified central leader, making sure that you have really good spacing on the tree. I think this is also a question of kind of where you are in the country and how the tree is going to be growing, because they sort of tend to respond in different ways.
Yeah, they said I would say they tend to grow as shrubs, pomegranates.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Though in my community garden in Los Angeles, it's like a nice we have like a nice modified central leader kind of tree, but yeah, I think when we're growing some of those more temperate things like figs and pomegranates in the more northeastern climates, we tend to grow them more like shrubs.
Kimberly, I see you have another pawpaw question on if you have seedling pawpaws, would you let the suckers grow up as well, or is it best to cut them to increase energy for the main trunk of the tree? I would cut out those suckers and let the main trunks kind of grow through. At a certain point, no, I wouldn't. I would let them end up thickening a little bit, forming their colony. But a lot of that also is going to be, what's the purpose of the site too? Can you allow the pawpaws to form that grove, to form that colony, or are they just going to be sort of single soldiers out there? That's a site maintenance question there, I think.
This is a good one to kind of end on, unless anybody has any that they want to speak out loud. But Jay is asking how much 20-20-20 fertilizer each year for a peach tree. Getting into some fertilizer questions.
So this gets into a whole different discussion, I think, about how we're working to fertilize our trees. My general recommendation is to work with really woodsy kind of materials. Most of the types of fertilizers that we're working with are going to be organic based fertilizers. So that is kind of more in my experiential set of providing the tree with woodsy mulch, with a heavy compost, really kind of keeping that understory covered, broad-based mineral amendments, just checking on what your soil content is. So that question is a little challenging in that also it really depends on kind of what your soil makeup is. Matt, you have thoughts about?
Yeah, I kind of agree with where you're going with this, because 2020 is pretty heavy, and so I do know that there are a lot of extension recommendations on synthetic fertilizers for fruit trees, and peaches are definitely heavy feeders. We, with our program here in Kansas City, we focus on a chicken manure fertilizer and also soil health and compost. But as far as sort of the general fertilizer recommendations for the chicken manure, we recommend 1 pound, and the chicken manure we offer is it's like a 5-4-2, sometimes it's a 5-4-3. So definitely lower, still somewhat balanced. But we recommend a pound per inch of trunk diameter. And that diameter is measured typically at about 18 inches from the ground level. And so what this oftentimes means is a lot of our 5 to 10-year-old peaches, we're giving them about 4 to 6 pounds of that chicken manure fertilizer per year. My guess is the 2020 would be a lot less. And then you would also need to sort of spread that beneath the drip line too.
And
I have a
we'll be
question.
covering soil fertility in I think it's the June workshop, so there'll be lots of different kind of discussion points in that one.
You know, I write this.
Did someone have a question? I'm sorry.
Yes, I did, if you can hear me.
Yes.
I have a couple pear trees. They're about 7-8 foot long and never been pruned. Did I get it right or whatever? Can I start pruning them back like an apple?
Yeah, so I mean, what I would say again is just definitely is a good time to start pruning them.
Okay.
Want to make sure that we're getting those nice scaffold branches off so that they're. Have you gotten fruit on your trees yet?
No, nope. I put them in last fall. Like I said, there was pretty big peach or pear trees.
Yeah, I mean, if they're starting to get too tall, then that's a good time to be able to kind of start to take them back a little bit. So we start to encourage that sort of side growth coming off.
Yeah. There's not very much angle for the spreaders. It's growing like I call it like a evergreen, bush or whatever. It's not the limbs ain't going out, they're like going up.
Yes. And that is definitely a thing that pears and Asian pears, they just want to kind of grow straight up. And one of the really
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, of course. One of the really good ways to be able to kind of manage some of that growth is to prune to those outward facing buds.
Okay.
This is where you can kind of take some of that height and start to train those vertical branches, both with the pruning to an outward facing bud, with the limb spreaders, with some kind of tie downs to start to create that structure of the tree. That's when you're in those first early years, before you start really getting fruit, you want to think about having those really nice angles on the scaffold branches that are going to be able to handle the weight of that fruit in the future.
Yeah, I remember growing up, the neighbor had peach or pear tree, and Oh, I just beautiful. It was a beautiful tree with beautiful pears, back when I was younger.
Yeah.
All right. I thank you. Appreciate you guys. This is really nice.
Good. One more question from Melissa, and then we'll break from here. But again, about a question about these low temps and when is it safe to prune with low temps? So, what is the risk of damage from very low temps after pruning? We'll have 40-degree temps for the next week in Michigan, and I plan to prune then. But I worry about very low dips. Is there a temperature threshold? This is a common question, so we were really going to need to highlight it on the follow-up.
Definitely. I mean, really what we're looking for is those really extreme temperature dips. We're talking about 0, talking about like below 0. And the rule of thumb that we like to try and give is 5 days. Kind of more or less, the bigger the trees are, the more they're going to be able to deal with the kind of cold shock that comes with them. So again, like if we're talking about a semi-dwarf tree, or if you're talking about a dwarf tree, I would kind of put those ones kind of towards the March side. If we're talking about a bigger, more mature tree, they can handle a little bit of that winter shock a little bit more. So those would sort of be my recommendations in that. So if you don't have a ton of trees to prune, kind of wait towards the later half there, and if they're smaller as well, right?
Excellent. All right. I think that's it. So can close it up, Ryan.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you guys.
All right, nicely done.
Thank you. Hey, Ryan, can you stay on? This is Kimberly.
Sure.
I'll just wait till everybody gets off.
Thanks for being on, Matt.
Yeah,
Thank you
certainly.
so much, Matt.
Looks like we still have some people on. Almost everybody. Okay.
All right.
So I sent you a really long email. I don't know
Okay.
if you saw it.
I saw it pop up on my phone. It was in my last.
So I was kind of laughing at myself because you've asked me 2 different questions and I responded with like equally very complicated long emails. I was like, he's gonna think every time he asks me for something, I have some like crazy response.
That's great though. I mean, that's how we're able to disseminate that information to the network.
So it was about the TP prep forms, and I just wanted to explain that there's 2 different ones that we use because some people like using one and some people like using the other. So I just
Okay.
kind of explained the options. I think it probably makes sense for you to just choose one that makes the most sense to you. If you're totally welcome to disseminate it to the network. We think that's great. But like my email to you, I realize is like a little complicated because I'm talking about 2 different forms. So
Okay.
to simplify things for everyone else, you might want to just take a look and choose whichever form you think makes the most sense to you.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you
So it's
much.
a long email, but I was just going to say, maybe read it and you can just give me a call anytime if you have any questions about it.
Perfect.
But
Yeah,
otherwise,
and
feel free
maybe
to
we'll
just choose
connect too
one.
with EB at some point too, to kind of touch base on some of that stuff, because I found it to be so helpful when you showed it to me.
Oh yeah, we couldn't run our plantings without that form for sure.
Yeah.
It allows like the manager of the planting, if anything happens to them, it means anybody else could lead the entire planting, which I think is huge. We have a map
Absolutely.
of where the trees are going. We have all the cultivars listed. We have, it's just very thorough. So that's the purpose of that form, really. And then we do have meetings with like everybody who's staffing it, and we started doing it with the partner organization. So we have a planning meeting like the week of the planting, where everybody is virtually on a call, and that's been huge. We usually do that with staff, but I've started including my partners, and it makes for such a smoother planting. So I do really recommend that as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great tip.
I was going to ask you,
Yeah.
Kimberly, how was your trip?
Costa Rica. Oh my gosh, it was
Oh,
amazing.
wow.
I was there last week. We saw sloths in the wild and dolphins came right up to our boat. We hiked into all these waterfalls and ate really amazing food. And we had a beautiful Airbnb that was walkable to the ocean and national parks. So it was pretty magical. Yeah, it was really sad I didn't. Ashley and Erica connected me with a consultant they work with, Juletta, who lives in Costa Rica.
Right.
But we ended up, it's like a long drive back into San Jose and we got in kind of late. And I like did not have the space to like take an Uber half an hour each way to her. I was like, we leave at like 3 a.m. tomorrow. So it was kind of, I was really excited to see her. And then I didn't end up seeing her, but we're going to do a video chat.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Nice.
I hope
Yeah. Nice to see your
Nice to see you.
faces.
Bye, Kimberly.
And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
yeah.